Welcome to the Beware the Moon podcast. My name is Hannah. Just real quick before we get started, I'm sorry this video is coming out spaced so far from my previous movie review. Unfortunately, all the dogwoods have started to bloom, and so I've become stuffy, as you can probably tell. And if you listen to the Buffy podcast that I do every Wednesday with Logic, you could probably tell then too. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do to kick this. My allergies are, I take vitamin C, I take antihistamines, and the dogwoods still continue to block my sinuses. So, I am going to sound stuffy. I was hoping not to. I was hoping maybe I could get it under control, but unfortunately I just don't think that's going to be the case. So, I apologize for sounding stuffy, but unfortunately that's just my life right now. I promise that I will not sneeze into the microphone, though. You will not hear me sneezing. I might have to cut, and I will let you know. I'll just say sneeze cut or whatever when I come back in, if I have to cut off randomly mid-sentence. Sometimes that happens. And the other thing is I promise not to, how people will snort and you can just tell they're, shooting snot up into their brain or whatever when they're trying to, keep the snot in. I promise not to record that as well. So bear with me, though. It'll get better at some point. Anyway, really excited to talk about today's movie, 2018's The Clovehitch Killer. This movie I find very fascinating. I think it's really more of a, I don't even feel bad telling you who the Clovehitch Killer is, because that's not the point of this film. This film is really more interested in the life of the main character and the emotional response of the main character. And this movie, when I watched it, I was like, oh, this is so BTK coded. For those who don't know what that is, there was a serial killer, I think in the 90s. I can't exactly remember the time frame, and I'm too lazy to look it up. Doesn't really matter, to be honest. But he was in Wichita. His real name was Dennis Rader. And he was the bind, torture, kill killer, the BTK. And basically what Dennis would do is he would choose someone and he would follow them around for months and months and months. And then he would pick a night and just go in and he would tie them up, tie their family up, rape them, torture them, kill them. So this movie does not get too graphic with those details. However, you can tell it's very Dennis Rader coded if you just know that basic amount of facts about him and then watch this movie. Because the killer turns out to be the main character's dad. And in real life, Dennis Rader also had a wife and kids, and he was a deacon at his church. You have Don Burnside in this movie, who's the Clovehitch Killer. He is very, he's very much a prolific figure in the community. He does Boy Scouts or something akin to it, and he also is very active in his church. He brings his disabled brother, God bless him, basically, so. That was all sarcasm, by the way, for those who didn't catch it. So basically, Dennis Rader in real life, he had kids. So he had a good rash of killings and then a big 10-year gap. And it was him waiting for his kids to be old enough to kind of do life a little bit more on their own so he could focus on his killings. And he has said in interviews that he wished he hadn't had kids because it really did put a damper on his serial killer career. Fucking crazy thing to say, but he's an insane person, so it makes sense. And I believe his daughter still talks to him because she's it's a very interesting thing. Investigation Discovery has done, obviously a ton of things on killers, but specifically the BTK, because his daughter has written a book and his daughter has talked about it's really hard to separate the two, and it's really hard to, or it's easier to separate the two. It's hard to recognize that they're both the same person because her dad was so good to them as kids, and he was playful and he was fun and he was present, versus him being this killer. And so she had a hard time for a while believing it, but of course the evidence was so overwhelming, and so she's like, how do I grapple with that? And this movie is kind of that. This movie is that question. How does one grapple with the fact that your dad, who is so kind and wise and loving to you and provides for you, how do you grapple with and accept the fact that he is also someone who will find a victim, tie them up, torture them, rape them, kill them? it's like, I can't even fathom that. Like, if I found out my dad was doing stuff like that, like, I'm a very facts and evidence based person. So like, if the facts and the evidence were like insurmountable, yeah, I would accept it, but it would be really fucking difficult because my dad is just such a nice, benign person. It's that scene from Psycho. She wouldn't even hurt a fly. Like, that's kind of like how I feel about my dad. So yeah, this movie, like I said, not really interested in the thrill of the mystery of who is the Clovehitch Killer. It's more about this kid finding out that his dad is the Clovehitch Killer and what does he do with that. And this movie, like I said, doesn't really get too graphic in with certain things. There is scenes at the end that are probably hard to watch if you're someone who's been in a situation where someone invades your home. There's a scene at the end where he ties a woman up and is basically going to kill her, and in the process of killing her, it doesn't happen. I can explain why. But if that is something that is going to upset you, I would say don't watch it. It is pretty upsetting, to be honest, because the lady actor in that scene is amazing. And she is like clearly terrified, clearly struggling to breathe. So, that part is really just like, it's really rough. And you think that the movie is going to show you him going through the whole process of just what he typically does. Luckily, it doesn't. This movie never shows any like rape scenes, and it doesn't really show any killing. It does show like crime scene photos of the aftermath, though. So if that's kind of stuff that you're sensitive to, I would say maybe skip it. Other than that, like me, I have PTSD. I'm an assault victim. It didn't bother me too badly. Like, it wasn't so bad that I was like, I can't watch this. And it didn't, yeah. So maybe just listen to the rest of the podcast if you're like on the fence about it. 'Cause when we get to that part towards the end of the film, I'll explain the scenes, and then you can decide from there if this is something you can watch or something you can't watch if you're someone who gets triggered by stuff like that. But, like I said, it's not very graphic, this movie, except the crime scene photos. It's really more exploring the emotional relationship Tyler has, which is the main character, with both his dad and the truth. So that's very interesting. And that's it for the spoiler free. We're going to get into spoilers, so go watch it yourself if you are like, this is totally something I can handle. Like I said, if you like investigation discovery stuff, you could probably handle this pretty easily. It's a very good movie. It's very well acted, very well scripted. The characters are all likable, even Don himself. I love Dylan McDermott plays Don, and if you've ever seen the first season of American Horror Story, or the first few seasons he's in those, he is specifically the dad in the first season of American Horror Story. And he does such a good job here, because in that it was so funny to see him in this, because that's what I know him from, and I just like see him as this like really sexy dad figure in those, like, he's a DILF in those, and then in this he's such a goofy, like, he's just like a kind of a geek, kind of a nerd. Like, he's really funny and goofy, and he's charming too. And Dylan just does such a good job of balancing like the different sides of the character. He is underrated in this role. It is incredible what he does with it. And the guy who plays Tyler, his name is Charlie Plummer. He kind of looks like little baby Chad Michael Murray, basically. I hear he's been in talks to play Haymitch in the Morning of the Reaping, I believe is what it's called, the new Hunger Games thing. They're possibly throwing his name out for playing a young Haymitch, and I think he would do an excellent job. He is really good in this role. He just has a lot of good physical, nonverbal acting cues that are just astounding. Like, they're great. He's perfect for this role. Anyway, getting down into the actual spoilers now. So the movie kind of opens, and we have this like victim's memorial, and Tyler is kind of in this like over voice. I don't know, the word for that escapes me at the moment, I'm sorry, but voiceover. It sucks being dyslexic, dude. Anyway, in the voiceover he's explaining like, 10 years ago, there were all these killings in our town, and suddenly they just stopped. And he was like, I'd never really given much thought to it until this. And so we see that there's like this Boy Scout moment, and we see this is the intro to Tyler and Dawn. And Dawn is the Boy Scout leader, troop leader. And so he's explaining different things to them, and then after they're done, Don pulls his son aside and he's like, hey, I can't send you to leadership camp. I'm so sorry. Like, we don't have the money for it. And he's kind of like, oh, okay, Dad. And then Don gets really, like, strangely playful after his son is clearly disappointed. And he kind of puts his son in a headlock and he forces him to say uncle and doesn't let go until he does. And later on in the film, Cassie says to him, maybe you just don't know what it's like to have a normal dad. And I'll explain who Cassie is when we get there. But she's like, maybe you just don't know what it's like to have a normal dad. And I think this is one of those moments where it's like, that's not really normal. Because, and again, it's like this really subtle, like, Dylan McDermott plays Don with a very subtle amount of, like, ferocity and kind of like intimidation and sinister quality, some very subtle sinister notes to him. And it's one of those things that you're like, am I imagining that? Because I think we've all come across situations or met people who you're like, is this guy really like a jerk, or is he nice? Like, is he a jerk or is he playing around? And I can't really tell. And he plays Don kind of on that fine line, except is this guy really like someone who would bind, torture, kill people, or is he just being goofy? And so this is one of those moments that you kind of get a feeling for, like, something about Don just doesn't sit right with you. And then in the next shot, we see them, like, the music they listen to in this movie is insane to me. The music is really, like, there's only 4 songs listed for the soundtrack. One of them is Yesterday's News, written by Ronnie Daddario. One of them is All You Saints, performed by Emma Jones and Brian Ott. You've Overcome, performed by Brian Ott. Billy Comes Home, performed by Heifervescent. And it's this very, like, unfortunately, I have no, like, grasp of this type of music, but it's this weird, like, if I had to imagine it, it's got, like, a very 50s, 60s, 70s feel, but it's, like, Christian music. So, like, it kind of feels like it feels like something that Silver would do. You know, they do the wham, bam, shang-a-lang, and from the, like, Guardians of the Galaxy movies, that band, it would be like if that band went super Christian and conservative. That's the kind of music that, like, plays in the background of this movie, and it just kind of adds to Don's hidden identity, and it adds to who Don's pretending to be. And I think too, like, this movie is saying something very subtle at some point about redemption and this, like, false identity that you put on for the people around you. And I think very much it has to do with, like, Tyler's church friends and Tyler's church people. And Don is seen consistently going to church. And so it's this weird, like, I don't know, like, I don't know what it's trying to say, and it doesn't really put too fine of a point on it, because I don't know if it even knows what it's trying to say about stuff like that. But, like Don, before he goes to do his, like, real bad thing, he goes to church and they're talking about the prodigal son, which is a story of redemption. It's a story of, you know, God is always waiting for you to just, you know, turn around and come back to him, basically. And so the pastor makes a fine point of, like, will you open the door? And Don clearly is like, fuck that, and goes and does his own thing. And so there's also these, like, shallow church friends that Tyler has that won't listen to him. And it's just, like, it's very much saying something. I just don't really, like, it doesn't really connect. And I don't know if what it's saying is just, oh yeah, there are some shallow people. Nobody's who they pretend to be is kind of, I guess, like, the underlying thing there is, like, people want to be something and they'll pretend to be that thing, but really they are another. Like, everybody has a mask that they wear, right? Is probably what that's trying to say. But part of this mask is, like, Don stops on his way home with Tyler from the Boy Scout meeting and has Tyler get out and kind of help a turtle cross a road. And so, like, it's already setting up, like, Don is pretending to be. I don't know if he's trying to be or just pretending to be. That's two very different things there. Very subtle difference, but basically it's the difference between becoming a serial killer again and staying a good dad, basically. Yeah. So it kind of just sets up that, like, Don is not someone you would think of as the Clovehitch Killer. So that night, Tyler steals his dad's truck to hang out with a girl, and they're, like, starting to make out, and she's like, how do you push the seat down? And he's like, there's a lever on the side, and she pulls up these weird photos, and they are photos of someone like, basically, like, bondage porn. And she's like, are you into this? And he's like, no, I'm not. That's not even mine. And he cannot for his life convince her that they're not his. And there's not even, I think it's really interesting because, like, this is Tyler's dad's truck, and so Tyler is, like, really confused, and he doesn't bring up the fact then that it's his dad's truck. He brings that up to her later, but there's no even, like, discussion or thought, like, that it could be his dad's. Like, they don't do that here. Like, me, I'd be throwing my dad under the bus. I'd be like, what the fuck is up with that guy? Why is he got this shit in his truck? But he doesn't. There's none of that. He kind of just takes the fall for his dad. So the next morning, he's like, I can't find my keys. Tyler, have you seen my keys? And he's like, and then they just kind of move on. And we see that, like, Don is really good family man. Like, he loves his kids. He loves his wife. He makes breakfast for them. He's making pancakes. He's like, oh, I'll pick up Rudy. Rudy is his brother who's unresponsive and in a wheelchair. And so we get to church, and it's, like, really obvious that bitch was talking shit about Tyler because everyone is, like, serving him looks. And one of his shit friends, who Billy, is kind of, like, reoccurring in the movie. He's not a pivotal role, but he's reoccurring. After church, Billy has not yet heard about the rumor, right? So he points out this girl who's hanging out outside the church. And he's like, she's here all the time. Maybe she's planning a church shooting. She's really sick, you know, like, she publishes the same report every year about the Clovehitch killings. And Tyler's like, well, maybe you just have a crush on her. And he's like, that's sick, Tyler. And he's like, she slept with, like, 5 guys on the football team, and her mother left to be a stripper. And he's like, we should pray for her and maybe call the police. And you're like, what a piece of shit. So, like, immediately you get, like, I feel like a lot of people, see this type of person, have seen this type of person, unfortunately. Like, that holier than thou, righteous and cannot be faulted. You can't compare him to anyone because he is, like, so much holier than thou. Everything is a sin. Like, this guy is just, like, the epitome of what everyone, including Christians, hate about Christianity, is that there are people like this that are part of it. Anyway, after church, Mom has the kids, like, help her coupon, and Tyler's like, why doesn't Dad have to help with couponing? And she's like, because your father has his own hobbies. And it's like, maybe that's the problem. Anyway, Billy texts him to call him a perv, and the mom, God bless the mom, she's so like, she's trying so hard, but also, like, it's one of those things where it's like, you're trying too hard, dude, like, just calm down a little bit. She is so unplugged from both her kid, her teenage son, and then, like, reality in general. She takes his phone and she's like, I hate how addicted you are to this thing. And he's like, Mom, I just need to see who's texting me. And she's like, what's so important? And it's like, how do I explain that? I stole my dad's truck for a second, and a girl found bondage porn in his truck. Like, he's not gonna explain that to you, bro. So he just kind of, like, puts his head down and gives up. And then we cut back to the memorial for the victims. And we see Billy mouths to Tyler that he's a perv. I was like, what a dickhead. They're supposed to be here, like, respecting and honoring the memory of these people who were, like, killed in such a violent and gruesome way, and he just, like, is taking this time to kick Tyler in the nuts across the way. Tyler tries to talk to the girl who found the photo, the girl he was making out with, and he tries to convince her again, like, it's not his, but she just doesn't care. It's not even that she doesn't believe him. She just doesn't care. Like, she's not going to listen to him because she doesn't care about how it's affecting him. And I think that this is very much a type of person that exists. Just very, like, self-centered and self-absorbed. So she walks off, and we see that the girl is there, the girl from outside the church who is, quote-unquote, probably planning a shooting. He asks... she asks him, what'd you do to piss off all your pals? And he's like, I've heard about you. And she's like, okay, well, I've heard about you too, perv. And I was like, ooh, gotcha. Get him. So then, like, after the memorial service, they all go to, like, basically a food pantry, and we see Tyler is, like, in his own little headspace trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. And I think, like, there's so many shots in this film that, like, are very subtly saying a lot about what's going on within the life of the characters. And so you have Don playing with Susie, his daughter, and her friends, and also trying to help at the food pantry, but he's, like, being goofy and just, like, a good dad. And it kind of, like, that's happening, like, in the foreground, and then in the background you have Tyler, who's just kind of, like, putting cans on a pallet or, like, in a little cardboard holder, and he is just, like, in his own world, deep in thought, and you can see he is just still, like, what the fuck have I stumbled across? And so, like, we know Don, so, like, we kind of cut to, like, Don keeps his shed locked, and so Tyler decides when his dad leaves, he's gonna go check that shed for stuff. And Tyler is so funny. He goes and he unlocks it, and he's like, happy birthday, Susie, because the combination of the lock is his little sister's birthday, which I think is so cute. Like, I think this movie does something, like, a little bit different than the reality, because I think Dennis Rader, with Dennis Rader, it's more like either of these characters, either of these people, you're like, why the fuck did they have a family? Like, why the fuck did they have kids? Like, why did they get married? Like, just why? And so Dennis Rader, who is the real life killer that this story is definitely taking pages from, he would have lunch every day with his wife. Like, he would drive from work to home so he could have lunch with his wife and then go back. And he literally, when they pulled him over for, like, they arrested him on one of these treks back to his house for lunch with his wife, and they pulled him over, and the officer's like, you're being arrested, da-da-da, and he said, well, if someone could please just let my wife know I won't be, or he said, I guess I won't be home for lunch with my wife if someone wouldn't mind telling her, something along those lines. And it's because, like, he knew he was getting arrested, he knew the jig was up, kind of a thing, but also, it's one of those things that I'm like, why is he doing it? Like, is he doing it because he has some sort of, like, attachment to his wife, or is it part of the facade? And so with Dennis Rader, especially since he came out and said, like, I kind of wish I hadn't had kids because, like, it really just put a damper on my serial killer career, which was more important to him than, like, anything else, apparently. Like, his daughter has said, like, he is very interested in anything regarding new serial killers. So she'll, like, find clippings of, like, if something happens in the newspaper, she'll bring him that. And so if there's, like, a serial killer case that's going around, that's, like, really high profile, he will ask her questions about it. He wants more info if she has updates. And so I think it's very, like, it's very, his goal was to be, like, a very famous serial killer. That was his goal. And so Don, you don't really get that with Don. And I also just think people are so complicated. Not obviously, like, oh, we should excuse what he did. He was such a good family guy. Pfft, fuck that. But, like, it makes me wonder, because he never threatened his wife. He never threatened his kids. And in the movie, too, like, Don says something to his wife about, like, you don't have to worry about anything. Like, you will never get hurt. Something along the lines of that, like, implying, like, I would never hurt you, without actually saying that. So, like, it's just very strange to me, and, like, it's one of those psychology things that I find deeply fascinating, is, like, why did these men decide to get married and have kids? And, like, Don is so interesting to me, because he clearly loves his daughter, and he loves his wife, and he does love his son, but the serial killing comes first and not getting caught comes first, and we kind of see that later on. But I just think it's very fascinating that like Susie's birthday is the combo to his shed. Crazy. Like, just absolutely kind of like mind-boggling. Anyway, Tyler goes in and he's poking around in the shed and he finds a loose board, and under that loose board he finds a box, and in the box is all this weird stuff, and it's like bondage porn, and he finds a Polaroid with like handwriting. It's clearly his dad's, that says Nora, Lucky's favorite. And so he's like, what the heck? He hears a sound, so he like quickly puts the stuff back. He puts all the shit back. He gets out. His dad is home, and his dad's like packing up this food stuff for the food pantry, calls for Tyler and can't find him. And so you think like, oh no, Tyler's gonna get got. But instead, like, Don goes looking for Tyler, and he notices the lock on the shed is back on and everything, but it's not set to 0, and Don always sets it back to 0. So he knows that like something's up. So cut to that night, Tyler can't sleep, so he goes to the computer and looks up like specifically like his county, the name Nora, and murder, and then boom, we get the immediate connection to Clovehitch. And so he's kind of like searching through this when his mom finds him, and his mom thinks he's looking at porn, and the poor kid cannot convince her that he's not looking at porn. Like, he's like, no, Mom, I wasn't. And she's like, I'm very disappointed in you. Go to sleep, Tyler. And he's like, but Mom, and she's like, go to sleep. And he's like, okay. And you're like, this poor kid's trying to solve, like, is my dad a murderer or not? And he's getting in trouble for porn. It's not even close to what he's doing, man. So then his dad takes him out to the shed, and he's like, you know, your mom says we have to have a talk. And he's like, I know you took my truck. He gives him a soda, which, like, there's no soda in the house. There's only soda out in the shed. And it's partially, I think, good stewardship practices. But then I think, which, if you don't know what that is, it's like the Christian concept that, like, you should be spending your money and your time and your energy and efforts and stuff on things that build you up rather than tear you down, especially since, like, your body's a temple. So I think it's one of those things where it's partially that, partially soda is fucking expensive, and this family doesn't have a lot of money. So Don is clearly like, he keeps the soda in his shop, and he'll have like 1 or 2, basically, is kind of like the implications. So he gives one to Tyler as like a treat, and he's like, you know, I know you took my truck the other night. You know, Mom worries about you driving because of what happened to Rudy. He's like, I think you're old enough, but I let that slide, and so now there's other stuff happening, and I think I need to set some things straight. And then basically Don gives him the talk, which the talk is awkward anyway, but like with a Christian parent, it's like a very specific type of awkward. So he's basically talking about, like, you know, we're created in God's image, and, you know, he's like, our bodies are temples, and we're supposed to be doing these things. And he's like, if you have thoughts, that's not a big deal. Everybody has thoughts, but, like, you don't act on them, obviously. So he's like, no pictures. So basically, don't be looking at porn. He's like, if you have thoughts, that's one thing. Just don't act on them. And then he goes, you know, what if a thought popped into your head right now, or you thought, you know, maybe you take one of these tools and bash my head in? You'd never do it in real life, but, you know, it's just monkey stuff, basically. Like, we have monkey brains, and so, like, we're trying to be like God, and then we have this monkey on the other side. And so he's like, it's just thoughts, like, it's just. And so it's kind of like setting up this idea for Tyler that his dad has this stuff, but maybe he's not the killer because, you know, it's just thoughts, it's just stuff. It's not like proof that his dad did anything. But he's also, like, seriously unsettled, so he goes to find Billy to try to clear the air, and Billy's just an idiot. Again, it's one of those things where he's like, he thinks he knows what Tyler wants to talk about, but Tyler doesn't. Like, obviously, like, I think he thinks Tyler wants to talk about porn, and he's like, no, Tyler, you have a choice. It's a sin, and you have a choice. And he's like, that's not even what I'm trying to talk about. But Billy just clearly doesn't want to listen. And so after that, Tyler's kind of like biking around, still thinking, and he kind of turns around and he finds the girl who, her name ends up being Cassie. She's the one who's like, Billy's like, oh, maybe she's planning a church shooting. And she's played by Madison Beatty, and she does a really good job of like it's Cassie, the character, is so, like, she's so affronting, and then also is really dry about it, but she's kind of, like, messing with you, too. So, like, he follows her, and she goes into the woods, and they're across this tiny little creek on one side or the other, and she has a rock in her hand, which I didn't even notice until, so she's like, oh, I get it, you heard that rumor about me and the 5 football guys, and you're kind of a perv, and she's like, why don't you whip it out, let's see what we're dealing with, and he's just kind of like, brain broken, like, this is not what I wanted. And she goes, I'm fucking with you. And he's like, no, I know, you know all about all this Clovehitch stuff, and I just want to know. And so she's like, you really want to know? And he's like, yeah, that's why I followed you, like, that's seriously why I'm here, like, I don't know anything about any of this stuff, and I want to know. And so she, like, drops the rock into the creek, and that's when I noticed the rock. So she thought maybe he was gonna attack her. And so I think that's such a, like, it's so good and subtle. But especially, we learned that Cassie is, like, the Clovehitch Killer's still out there. So she's being cautious because of that. And I also just think it's a really subtle way of kind of, like, showcasing how women kind of have to live their lives, unfortunately. Like, it would be really nice if all men were just super nice and super great, but apparently 1 in 10 men or something like that has assaulted a woman. And so it's like it's like a crazy high amount of both men who are assaulting and women who have been assaulted. Like 1 in 3 women have been sexually harassed to a certain extent, and then it's like 1 in 4 have had a sexual assault happen to them and completed. So it's a very high number. So clearly, like, it like, women just know we have to be careful. Like, it doesn't matter what we're doing, where we are. If there's a man around, there's a chance that that could be us, especially if we don't really know that man. And, like, the odds that the guy who's going to rape you is someone you know is higher than it being a stranger, but it still does happen. And if the odds aren't 0, why wouldn't you be cautious about it? And so that's kind of, like, it's just, like, a really interesting thing that I think, like, good for the filmmakers for putting in that little detail. And I don't know if that was, like, a Cassie thing, like, or a Madison Beatty thing, I mean, or if it was, like, the directors and the direction, but it's really smart, and it's really good character building, because it shows that Cassie is aware, like, of the potential dangers that are going around and such, and she is very much a fighter and not a, you know, she wants to know the truth, and she wants to fight. So it's just really good character setup as well as world building, as well as it's based in reality. So just very clever, especially with the director being Duncan Skiles, who is a man. Just a really good, really smart, clever thing. So anyway, Cass is actually the only one who's listening to him and what he wants. So she writes down an address from, like, in the book, rips it out, this piece of paper, gives it to him, and goes, okay, come here after 3. And she's like, bring cookies. So he shows up to this house, and it's an older lady who answers, and he's like, sorry, I'm looking for Cass. I brought cookies. And she immediately, like, lets him in. And I just think it's so funny that, like, this old lady is like, bribe me with cookies. He's like, your grandma's interesting. And she's like, that's not my grandma. She used to work for the cops, and she copied a bunch of files and wrote a book about Clovehitch. And Cassie has files on all of the 10 official victims of Clovehitch. And she's very much like, I think there were more. There's only 10 official victims. I'm pretty sure there were more. They just haven't really, like, looked into it. He asks her, very interestingly, if they took Polaroids. And she's like, nope, it was all digital. And she even says, like, one of the victims was found outside of Tyler's church, and that victim didn't even go there. And he's like, oh, is that why you kind of hang around, because you're hoping to find more evidence? And she's like, no, there's obviously no more evidence in the area. I'm using the FBI playbook to try to catch the killer. She's like, I don't think he stopped killing. He can't. He's insane. And so killers will often return to the crime scene so that they can kind of, like, relive basically the glory of the kill. Is kind of like how it is for serial killers. So she's, like, clearly trying to catch the killer, which is interesting because you're like 16, bruv. How do you think you're gonna do that? But whatever. That night, Tyler and his family are playing cards together. They're having family time, and Tyler tells them that he kind of wants to do some afternoon tutoring, and that's clearly, like, a cover for him going and talking to Cass. And the mom is like, okay, that's fine, but, like, leave your evenings open because that's family time. And this is like one of the fun little things about Don that I like. I'm like, this is such good acting, such good character building, because Don is like, he wins the round, and the mom and the sister are like, no, not again. And he goes, don't hate me because I'm beautiful. And it's just so funny. And I'm like, this guy is so charming. Like the killer, the serial killer side of him, like, if that didn't exist, I would totally love to be married to a guy like Don. Like, he's goofy and he's charming and he's fun and he's a hard worker, and like the part of him that is Don Burnside and not Clovehitch is so good and just so like interesting and like such a good family guy. And it sucks that there's this other half to him. And so like, this is one of those moments that I was like, it's so like, it kills me that he's also the serial killer, because if he just wasn't a serial killer, he'd be a really great man. But I think that's kind of like obviously the point of him being a really good man, is that he's a serial killer. This is a cover. He wants people to question whether, like, if they ever found out like maybe Don is the killer, like, that he would want people to be like, no, it's just not possible. And that's kind of the point of, like, I think to Dennis Rader in real life, the reason why he was part of his church and the reason why he was a hard worker and the reason why he had a family, because they just would want you to question whether or not they're the killer if you ever like got a whiff of their scent. They want you to question reality, like, oh, it can't possibly be him, he's got a family and he's this and he's that. And so just a very interesting and kind of gut-wrenching part of it. So then the next day, Tyler goes to Cass's, not grandma's, house. They pour over some Clovehitch facts, and then as he's leaving, we see Don in his truck. And so Don knows his son is not tutoring. So then Don confronts Tyler that night, and he's like, at first you're like, Tyler's kind of like freaked out, like, what is he gonna say? And then he's like, you've got yourself a girlfriend. And he's like, listen, I won't say anything to your mom about you sneaking around and lying to her, but in return, you've got to bring her over so we can all meet her. And so the next day, Tyler's like hanging out with Cass, pouring over Clovehitch facts, and he goes, hey, would you want to go to dinner tonight at my house? She goes, no. And he's like, my parents want to meet you. And she's like, why do they want to meet me? And so he explains a little bit, and she's like, oh Lord. And he's like, don't talk about Clovehitch though. He was like, they don't know anything about anything like that. Also, just don't talk about anything. And she goes, great, I'm totally going. It sounds like fun. And then like she does end up going, which I think is so funny. Like, I don't know, like, why would you ever agree to that? Like, Cass is just such a wild card. I love it. And she punks the whole family, like, immediately by joking that she's, like, getting into Wicca. And the mom is like, oh, I've heard of that. It's not witchcraft. And then Tyler's like, she's fucking with you, mom. Like, basically, like, she's kidding, she's joking. And so the mom's like, oh thank God. Like, you could tell she was trying to be nice about it. It's just so funny. It's so good and awkward, and Cassie like makes it really awkward for a second. And like she does like start asking about like, oh Don, I heard you're like the troop leader and I know you know about knots, and that makes Tyler really nervous, and he's like, can we just talk about something else? And Don's like, I mean, she asked. Like, so after like a couple more minutes, she kind of is like, listen, I'm so sorry, like I just get really nervous and I would hate to leave a bad first impression. Like, you know, Tyler and I have a lot of fun hanging out together. And they're like, oh, you don't have to be nervous, sweetie. Like she really does like understand the situation and the emotions present, and so she really does like it's clear she really does like Tyler and his family, or else she wouldn't have agreed to this. And so Dawn lets Tyler take her home, and on the way home she tells him to pull over, and she's basically just like, you think your dad is the Clovehitch Killer? And he's like, gets really like sweaty palmed basically, and she starts laughing, and she's like, there's no way it's Dawn. And Tyler like explains like, found this bondage in his truck, and then I was in the shed and I found this, and it said Nora, Lucky's favorite. And she's like, that's so weird, like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, I'm sure it's nothing, your dad just is into some kinky stuff. And then she's like, let's go. What, did you think we were gonna make out? Drive. And it's just like, poor Tyler is so like, he's just like, oh okay. He's so awkward, and I love that about Tyler. So Tyler, like, he gets home, and Dawn is singing a song about doing the dishes, and I I love it. Like, I was like, I want to be married to a guy who's like that, but without the serial killer parts. Because he's just like, I am doing all the dishes. And it's just like, why? And then he's very playful with Tyler when Tyler comes in, and he's just like so proud of his son, basically, for having his first girlfriend. It's very cute. And then that night, Tyler wakes up because there's like a knock on his window, and it's Cass. And she's like, I couldn't stop thinking about Lucky's favorite and Nora, and she's like, Nora got a note the week before she was killed, and guess what it said? And so Tyler takes her to the shed to show her the Polaroid, but the box is gone. And so Cass is like, are you sure? So she reaches down to double check, and she finds papers, and it's these schematics for a hellish torture room under the house. And Tyler and her are both, like, floored. Like, the schematics are insane. Like, I want to go through and just kind of, like, pause and just read all of them, like, because it's just so insane. Like, and it's such a good detail, and it's such a smart detail. And I do think Dennis Rader had something like this as well, where he had this, like, idea for, like, a torture room or something, and just never was able to, like, make it come to fruition, thank God. But she's like, make sure he doesn't know that we know, and you need to come to my not grandma's house, like, ASAP. And they put the stuff back, and so Tyler in his own time kind of gets curious about the schematics, and he knows that, like, it's for under the house, so he finds the opening, crawls under the house where the torture chamber could go, and he like, first of all, like, as he's crawling, it's clearly stinky. Like, he puts his shirt over his mouth, and he finds a shower. He finds, like, this room, and it's, like, a legit room under the house. And so, like, it has, like, a shower, a toilet, a mini fridge, what appears to be some clothes, and then it's got a box full of more bondage porn and also schematics. So, hooray. That's awesome. And also in this box is a smaller box, and inside that box are driver's licenses. Specifically, the driver's licenses of basically all the Clovehitch Killer's victims. So, like, at this point, we're like, oh yeah, Don is for sure Clovehitch. This is also when we find out they're in Kentucky, because they're Kentucky driver's licenses. But the next day, like, Dad's like, hey, you know what we haven't done in a while? Camping. Let's go camping, Tyler. And Tyler does not want to, but Don does not leave room for him to say no. And you're like, oh, yikes, yikes, yikes. And so they drive out, walking out to the campsite Don wants to go to. And Dad is trailing behind Tyler with the rifle in hand. And clearly it makes Tyler nervous. And also, like, me, the first time I was watching this, I was like, oh my God, he's gonna shoot him. They get down, though, and they get, like, their campsite ready, and the first thing Don asks is, did you tell anyone? And you just start, like, internally screaming. And Don's like, look, Tyler, that stuff that you found, it's not mine. And he's like, then who the fuck is it, basically? And he's like, well, it's Uncle Rudy's. I was gonna tell on Uncle Rudy, but then Rudy crashed, and he's like, and then Rudy tried to, like, kill himself, and he's like, I thought he was in a car crash, and he was like, yeah, he was trying to kill himself. And he's like, so then I was gonna turn him in, and he didn't want that, and so he was gonna kill himself, and, like, you know, I didn't want to break your mom's heart, and what would it do anyway? I mean, it's not like telling anyone was gonna bring the victims back, and then also there just wasn't a good time, because there was, you know, Susie was being born, some darn thing was happening, and I just didn't want to do that to us, and to your mom, and to you guys, and Rudy's basically a vegetable anyway, so, like, there's not gonna be justice done. And so Tyler says, okay, well then do something with it. Like, burn it or take it to the cops, but, like, if it isn't yours, do something with it. And so that night we see Don burns it in front of Tyler. And anyone who knows anything about serial killer psychology is, like, probably having a panic attack, because if you know anything about serial killer psychology, is, like, especially if they're keeping trophies, it's so they can relive those moments. And so these tokens are pieces of gratification for them. And so you know it's not going to end well. So then the next day, the Boy Scouts are in a session, and Cassie shows up to talk to Tyler. And she's like, you went camping? I was freaking out. And he's like, it's not him. It wasn't Dad. And Cassie's like, I don't know. I went under your house. And so Cassie, like, knows it is his dad. And Billy shows up in the middle of this conversation to complicate things. And Billy ends up, like, getting into it with Cassie. And Tyler, like, punches Billy in the face for Cassie. And it's so funny because then we cut to, like, Tyler's in his pastor's office. And he's like, hey, bud, I just want to know, where's Tyler Burnside? And he's like, what? And he's like, because the Tyler Burnside I know wouldn't use violence to resolve his disputes. And you're like, what the it's just such a, like, it's such a pastor thing, dude. It killed me. But anyway, we cut to Dad is sending Tyler to leadership camp. And he's like, thanks for coming through with the money, Dad. And he's like, of course, son. I wish, like, I really wanted this for you, blah, blah, blah. And so, there's this really cute sibling moment where Susie's like, I'm gonna get fat while you're gone so you don't recognize me. And you're like, what the fuck? It's really cute, though. So Tyler leaves, and then Don suggests to his wife that night, like, that she go visit her mom with Susie. And so he's like, yeah. She's like, oh, you can take the time off work. And he was like, no, but I think it'd be really good for you guys. And then you guys go up for a couple weeks, and I'll come up that last weekend and drive back down with y'all. And she's like, okay, I'll call my mom. And then, like, that night, him and his wife are, like, trying to do it, and he just can't perform. And so you knew that this was going to happen, because a lot of times serial killers, like, especially the sexually motivated serial killers, their trophies are kind of tied to their sex drive and their sexuality. And so getting rid of those obviously emasculates him, quote unquote, in his own his own mind. And, so obviously, like, I knew what was going to happen. I was like, he's not going to be able to do anything for her. And, yep. So the next day, the ladies leave, and then we get this montage of Don doing work and Don things. And part of the Don things is that he's clearly stalking a lady, which you assume is going to be his next victim. So he goes home, and he's listening to, like I said, like, this weird, like, Village People soundtrack. Like, it's like that scene in Hot Fuzz where he's jogging through the village. It's like that kind of music. Dressed in a dress, and he's taking pictures of himself in the bondage stuff, obviously to try to fap to. But while he's doing this, there's a ring on the doorbell, and it's Cass. Cass is there, so he, like, quickly strips down and gets into normal clothes. And he's like, oh, Cass, come on in. And she says she's looking for Tyler. And he's like, oh, he went away for leadership camp, didn't he tell you? And she's like, oh, we haven't really been talking much lately. And she sees that Don is taking photos, and he takes one of her, and you can see, like, something clicking, and it gets, like, something in his mind clicks, and so you're like, oh god, Cass is gonna die. Like, it gets so tense for a second. And then Cass gets interrupted. She gets a call from her dad, and she's like, okay, I have to go. I gotta go meet my dad. And he's like, oh, okay. Have a nice day. After she leaves, he's going through his photo shoot of, like, him in the dress and stuff, and he gets pissed. He's frustrated. This isn't working for him, so clearly he's going to go back to plan A, which is create more photos the old-fashioned way. Do yourself a right proper murder. Don goes to church that weekend, too, and like I said earlier, it's this parallel of the prodigal son, and Don internally is like, fuck that. He sneaks into the victim's house after tying a clovehitch knot on some pipes outside. She's asleep on the couch. And we kind of see this, like, play out in such a, like he's such a manipulator. It's crazy. Like, Don is master manipulator to the extreme. Just insane amount of manipulation, emotional manipulation. He wakes this lady up. She's sleeping on the couch, wakes her up. He tells her not to scream. He's got a gun. He's like, listen, I just robbed a bank. I'm trying to get the cops off my tail. Don't be afraid. I don't want to hurt you. I just want to get away. And so he takes photos of her, and he threatens to give those photos of her to his friends if she tells the cops, and they'll find her. And he's like, but I don't think you'll do that. You're much smarter than that. So he's like, okay, the last thing I got to do is tie you up. And she's like, I won't do it. I won't say anything. And he's like, I know, but I just gotta tie you up just in case. So he has her tie herself up, and he's like, oh, no. that's way too loose. You're not doing it right. And he's like, you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself. And there's this saying that they use, 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, and the mom uses it first with Susie, and then he's using it here, and it's such a, like, I don't know, man, it gives me the creeps. And after he ties her up, he, like, lays down behind her, and he's like, oh, Lucky likes your shampoo. And so I missed this the first 2 watches. On my 3rd watch, that's when I realized he is quote-unquote lucky. And so I think very much it's just this tie-in to, because, you know, you call getting sex getting lucky, and so it's this tie-in to this Clovehitch personality of his, is his more sexual primal side, and without it, he cannot get satisfied sexually. But once she's tied, he starts strangling her, and then he hog ties her on the floor and starts looking through her undie drawers for souvenirs. And then he grabs pantyhose in a plastic bag, and he puts the bag over her head and ties it with the pantyhose. And he's very takes his time doing everything he's doing. He takes a picture of her struggling, and the whole time she's making this awful sound that just, like, it's pretty upsetting. Just like she can't breathe, basically, kind of a sound, and she's having a panic attack for obvious reasons. And it's pretty fucking upsetting, and he's just taking his time. He takes a picture of her, and after he does, we see in the threshold of the door to the bedroom, Tyler appears. And the first time I went, what? And that's fucking right, it's Tyler. And Don is just as shocked as I was the first time around, and Tyler's like, is she okay? And Don is just, like, ignoring that, and he's like, why are you here? You're not supposed to be here. And he puts his black glasses back on, and he goes dad mode again, and so he's like, son, like, I'm disappointed, kind of a thing. And it's just, like, master manipulation again. So then we see the last few days from Tyler's point of view. And Cass had left him a note and to tell her to meet him at Nora Devlin's house. And so he's like, what, why are we here? And she's like, the only places I know are Clovehitch places. And he's like, look, I want to hang out with you, but no Clovehitch stuff. It's not my dad. And so Cass is like staring at the house, and she's like, and it's an abandoned house, by the way. It's not like they're standing outside of someone's house. After Nora died in it, apparently it just became abandoned. And she says that she feels Nora sometimes. And he's like, what? And then she kisses him to convince him to go into the house with her, so he follows her. And she explains how the killer killed Nora. He came in through the basement, tortured her, shows him where the body was found, and then she asks him what his dad said to convince him. And she goes, I'm not accusing your dad. I just want to know what happened. And so, like, it's very much like leaving room. Cass does what all the other characters in Tyler's life don't do, right? They give him room to explain. And she's like, I genuinely want to listen. I want to know what happened. Like, I'm interested in just the truth. If it's your dad, it's your dad. If it's not your dad, it's not your dad. I just need to know what happened. And so he spills the story about Rudy because it gives him enough space to do that. And so she said she was like, Tyler, when I went under your house, I found rope fibers. And he gets upset. And so Cass admits, because he's like, I know you're just doing all this Clovehitch stuff to be mysterious or whatever. And she's like, no. Clovehitch killed my mom when I was 5. And she says, I remember a man coming in and making my mom cry, and then he put me in the bathtub while he raped and killed my mom in the other room. And she said she turned on the water so she didn't have to hear her mom screaming. And she's like, my mom isn't one of the 10 official victims, but her name was Crystal. And then Tyler is like, Crystal so-and-so? And she's like, how did you know? And he's like, her driver's license was in with all the other victims' driver's license. He said there were 13 driver's licenses. So Cass has been right all along, which is good for her, like good vindication for her, because she just had this feeling like this is all the other signs point to Clovehitch. It's just there wasn't a knot outside. And so, her mom's one of the victims, and so she asks where the driver's licenses are. And Tyler admits that Don burned them. He made Don burn them. And so she asks him, like, is there any doubt in your mind about your dad? Any at all? And then we cut to the day he quote unquote leaves for leadership camp. He gets off the bus and then he meets with Cass. And he basically stays at her place for the next few days. And then she's like, your dad is a handyman, right? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, well, that explains why there's no forced entry. And he's like, but Uncle Rudy was a handyman too. And so they decide to stalk his dad for the next few days. And Cass notices Dawn following a woman. He's like, he's stalking that lady. And so he's like, we don't really know for sure though. And she's like, hey, what kind of phone does your dad have? And so the day Dawn is dressing up, Tyler sneaks in so they can put a tracking device on the phone. But he gets stuck inside the house because his dad is walking around and he knows he's going to get caught. So he texts Cass for help, and that's why she rang the doorbell. And the call to get her out was actually not her dad, but it was Tyler. And they do successfully put a tracker on Dawn's phone. And so whenever Dawn leaves, Cass wants to go after him, and Tyler's like, we should wait till he sneaks out at night or something. And Cass is like, she just doesn't even like entertain that. She leaves to follow Dawn, and so Tyler follows her, and Tyler thinks he's just working, but Cass, he's like, if my dad sees me, like the jig is up, like he's gonna see me if we keep following her around in the day. And he almost does get caught, but he lays under a tree. It's one of those thick like evergreens. And he lays underneath it, and his dad drives right by and doesn't see him. And so when Cass comes back out, she's like, come look at this. And it's a Clovehitch knot. And she's like, I saw your dad tie this knot on this lady's house. And then she goes up to the glass door of the porch and is like, Tyler, come up here, come look. And they look inside, and there's photos on the wall, and it's clearly the woman he was following. It's her house. And so Tyler vigilantly watches his dad's location that night. And they decide the next day to go like confront Dawn at home. And Cass is like, do you want me to go in with you? And he's like, no, I really need to talk to him alone. But Cass follows him anyway, which I think is hilarious and a really smart decision, as it turns out, later on. So they walk around, but their dad's not there. His cell phone is. And so they know, like, oh shit, he left the cell phone here and just went over there. So they rush to the lady's house, and then we cut to Tyler confronting Dawn. Tyler is like, Cass, help her. So she goes to untie the lady, and then Dawn tries to convince Tyler that Cass is manipulating him. Just like the wildest, most insane, narcissistic, sociopathic shit you've ever heard of. No, son. She's manipulating you. I'm not manipulating you. I'm in the right. And he's trying to say that, like, him and this lady are having an affair and they're just really kinky. And he's like, your mom totally knows about it. And Cass is like, are you believing this bullshit? So Dawn's like, if this gets out, it's gonna hurt your mom and your sister, Tyler. Please. He's like, you gotta lower your gun. We gotta talk about this. And, like, Cass has a gun, but Dawn takes it from her and, like, tries to knock her out. And he's like, He like kind of holds the gun up. He's like, I don't trust her with a gun, son, but I trust you because I know you know gun safety. And so eventually Dawn convinces Tyler to hand his gun over. And he's like, I'm not mad, just disappointed. And then he points the gun at Tyler and he pulls the fucking trigger. And this is like the turning point for Tyler. Tyler didn't load the gun. So when his dad goes to shoot him, nothing happens. There's just the click. And so Tyler attacks his dad and they're like wrestling, and Tyler nearly gets choked out, but Cass recovered. She slams a vase on top of Dawn's head and helps Tyler get up, and then just like does it again for good measure. And so they're both like winded and they're kind of freaked out. And Tyler's like unable to speak because of the choking. Cass pulls out her phone, but Tyler like just like quietly stops her, and they decide to go old school with it. So we see Dawn is missing. There's posters posted around town about Dawn Burnside missing. Poor mom is now working, and things are of course tougher without dad around. There's no pancake breakfast, just oatmeal, which Susie is like upset about, and she's like, please. And so Tyler offers to pick up a few ships at Billy's uncle's shop. And she's like super grateful to Tyler. The phone rings, and clearly the mom goes to answer it, and clearly it's like the police. They found Dawn. And so they go to the church where the pastor embraces all of them. And then Tyler is like holding Susie in the lobby while mom talks with the pastor. And so then Tyler meets up with Cass at outside of Nora's. And she's like, yeah, the lady survived. Nothing will be connected to Clovehitch. The lady never even saw Don's face. Like, everything is good. And Tyler, like, looks sad and sounds sad, but Cass reminds him, like, this is what you wanted. And that night, Tyler goes back home, and he's, like, super sweet to his mother. Like, he's just such a sweet character. I absolutely love Tyler, and I also love the way Charlie Plummer kind of, like, portrays him. He just does a really good job. Tyler is so sympathetic and so sweet, and you just kind of wish he wasn't in this situation. And same with his mom. She sits down on Tyler's bed and says the police wanted to talk to him about Dad's accidental death because they don't think it was an accident. And Tyler's like, they think someone killed him? And she's like, no, God, no. Like, she's like, she kind of implies, like, they think it was a suicide. And when she says that, she, like, loses it. And Tyler holds his mom and is just, like, holding her while she's crying. And he's like, it's okay, Mom, it's okay. It's so sad. And then we're at Don Burnside's memorial. Their troupe does the flag representation. Billy is good here. He's like, he like turns it around in this scene. Like, good for him, because he was a little shitbag, but he's like really proudly presenting the flags for Don. And he even gives Tyler a hug as they kind of like switch spots so Tyler can speak. And he's like, you know, the troop leader would usually speak, but I'd rather speak about him. And so it's like this really good speech, and it's kind of like, it's got these undertones of like how Tyler can separate the different parts of his father. And so he's basically like, you know, Don was this to everyone and he was this to me. And so he doesn't bring up the Clovehitch shit, obviously. But we get to see like what actually happened to his dad. Cass helped him drag his dad into the woods. You see Tyler like stoking a fire, building a tent. To make it look like Don had just gone camping. And then he has Don is kind of like coming to. We see Tyler with the gun in his hand, and he points it at his dad's face, and Don is just like still coming to, so he's confused. And the voiceover is Tyler still giving his speech, and so he's like, Dad, if you can hear me, I love you. And we presume that as soon as he's like, that's kind of like what punctuates him pulling the trigger, even though we never get to hear or see him pulling the trigger, because that's the end of the movie. And so we just kind of know inherently that like that's what Tyler did, is Tyler made it look like an accident so he could help his mom. And I think too, like, it's very important that like Cass knows what happened, so like she's in the clear. She understands Clovehitch is dead, her mom was avenged, all that stuff. And so I mean, it's sad for all the other victims, but I also think it kind of, like, this movie kind of accentuates, that, like, one person's actions do not just affect themselves. Like, Don is using his he knows that his actions will affect Susie and his wife and Tyler, and he just doesn't give a fuck. He gave a fuck for a certain amount of time. Tyler made him burn all of his trophies. So then he is like, I got to do it again. And so even knowing that how badly it would affect his family if they find out, he still goes and does it, tries to do it anyway. And so it's this very interesting look into like, what would it look like if someone you knew and loved was a sociopath and a serial killer? And like, this movie is just, like I said, it's very fascinating. So highly recommend it. The acting is great. I think too, like, having Cass is so important. And then even the like I am a Christian. I say fuck a lot, but I don't think saying fuck is a swear, but is a sin. But like, you know, I think there, like, a lot of times, like, a lot of the portrayals of Christians in media, I think, are vastly unfair and also really just like irritating. And as much as they are in this one, they're also justified. And so I don't have an issue with it, because Billy is young. Amy, who is the girl who's telling everyone Tyler's into kinky shit, she's young. And so you have like, you definitely have people like that in the church. And so I don't think it's over the top or anything. I think that they're smart characters to add in there, or else you don't have room for him to go to Cass. And Cass is such an important part of him figuring this out. And so I just think that this movie it's great. Yeah. And I basically just condensed a movie that's like an hour and 40 minutes into an hour and 5 minutes. Yay! Feel so achieved today. Anyway, thank you guys very much for listening. Again, sorry I'm stuffy. Sorry the sound quality is kind of a little weird. I don't really, I like to hold my microphone in my hand because I feel like it's just one of those psychological things of like, you won't hear me if I don't, but then like I realized how fucking loud and obnoxious it is, so I apologize. I will remember in the future not to do that. But thank you very much for listening. If you're interested, on Wednesdays I have a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast with a buddy of mine, One Logic Dies, who is over on Rumble. We do that every Wednesday. We start around noon and we live stream it. So if you go over to Rumble, you'll catch the live stream. If not, you can listen to the recording either over there or here on my channel. I do horror movie reviews. I try to do one a month at the very least. And then I'm also working on reading through Prettiest Girl in the Grave by Christopher Triana so I can do a horror book review. I also have one other horror book review on my channel right now, which is Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana. So check that out especially if you're someone who's like, I cannot read a book, like I just can't do it, but I want to know the story. I tell you basically everything that happens in the book. That was kind of how my sister was. She was not a big reader, but she enjoyed stories, and so I would just tell her what happened in the books I was reading. So there's that too if you're interested in that, especially Gone to See the Riverman is a very interesting book, as is Prettiest Girl in the Grave. I'm also working through Along the River of Flesh so that I can review that one as well. But thank you guys so much for listening. Check me out on Twitter at Beware Moon. Check me over at Rumble and Beware the Moon Podcast, here on YouTube at Beware the Moon Podcast as well. And I say here on YouTube as if I'm not also uploading this video to Rumble. But anyway, check me out, all three sites. I do gaming streams on Rumble as well. I'm trying to do a little bit of those over here on YouTube just to kind of get more people interested in the podcast, because unfortunately live streaming is like the thing, and you don't get as much exposure if you're not doing it. So anyway, thank you very much, guys. Hope you have a wonderful week. Don't be afraid to go outside, get some sun, put your feet in the dirt. It's good for you. Take care.